draft of API Factory, the journey with Amadeus and Volkswagen Finance Services from Santiago and Patrick.
And with Patrick, correct. So thank you very much for joining us. We will start today by not only sharing knowledge from both sides, just a very short disclaimer. Amadeus and Volkswagen Financial Services, we are not working together as companies. This is just two techies that came together, and are sharing the experiences from working in different domains. So when we started preparing these slides with Patrick, we started seeing a lot of similarities with factories. And nowadays, how APIs are being built, how APIs are being treated in organizations, they're really, really taken as a product. And we want to share with you here all the similarities when building a product in the domain of a factory.
True. And when you speak about factory as manufactured product, what is important also is to think as a producer. So this is basically the focus that we'll give you today with Santiago, and Amadeus will focus on the point of view of the producer and what we can take inspiration from the factory. So basically, when you look about the factory, what is interesting is to think about the production line. Of course, when you would like to industrialize things, you need a production line. And when this production line is started, what is important is potentially also to understand what kind of component can be reused during the production line. So basically, you need to have some inputs to organize things. And what is important is not only human activity. What is important is the concept of automation, how to automate the production line. So how is it possible? It's also a question of organization.
So when it comes to a factory, one of the most important things before evaluating how good a product is are standards. There are a lot of different standards nowadays floating in the industry. So how are APIs standardized? But in order to be able to produce APIs at scale, you need to have a step-by-step approach. That means basically you need to have a well-established methodology in the factory. And last but not least, if you are developing an API or if you are developing a product that has no quality, you will be in very big trouble, basically. So you really need to ensure at each and every step of your methodology that what you are producing has a high level of quality. So let's start with the first point today, basically. So when it comes to production, how are you guys dealing with that, Patrick, in Amadeus?
So yes, we take inspiration about the concept of manufactured product with a factory. So what about APIs in Amadeus and what about APIs in Volkswagen Finance Services? So first of all, I think it's good to present ourselves. So let's introduce myself. So I'm Patrick Brosse, working in Amadeus, leading the API and data model governance. And Amadeus is a well-known company in the travel industry as IT provider, where we are providing some product for airlines, airports, hospitality, basically to help their traveler to work in a continuity and to build their journey in smooth manner. So it's something that we'll see. So basically, all our products are based, most of them, on APIs, and their system and are interacting with us. So what about you, Santiago?
So on our side, Volkswagen Financial Services is basically the financial backbone and the financial services backbone of the whole Volkswagen group. We are developing different type of products, especially for financing, leasing, insurance, even we are going to the bike industry. And our goal is to digitalize as much as possible how contracts are being closed, how financial contracts are being closed. We started approximately 7 years ago with a digital program, digitalizing our ecosystem. And we started by building front ends, then building APIs. Then we realized that we actually needed an API platform, and we needed a specific team to offer that as a managed service. And now here we are with a pretty nice landscape, and we are comparing ourselves with Amadeus.
Okay, so let's start, as we started to explain you, Basically, what about the concept of methodology? Let's take an example how we organize in our company. Of course, our product are based on our clients, and our clients, as a provider, are expecting basically some requirements and business requirements. So basically, it's very important for us to do the analysis with the product management, with analysts about the customer or client requirement. But when you see Compact API, we enter at the beginning of the process to build what we call an API contract via a process of API design. So it's something that we try to motivate our teams to start from that point of view, because we know that it is a visible part of the iceberg, and it's something which is very important for all the chain. And when you speak about the chain, the API contract should be human readable, because we know that the producer and the consumer will use it as a reference everywhere in their interaction. So from the beginning to the end. So basically, it's important to use it as a source of truth for the code generator on both sides, on producer and consumer side. So basically, from producer side, of course, the API contract will be the baseline for the design of the database, for the coding part, the data insertion, and of course, the testing activities. For the consumer point of view, we know that the API contract will be super important for them to try the product, to understand the product, to verify if the requirement is corresponding to their needs, and also potentially to code, test, and ensure the integration. So basically, the API contract will be here also to help developers, QA, and developers and quality insurance people on both sides to verify that it's working well. So this is part of our methodology.
So when it comes to standards, I was mentioning before that standards are a must, basically. Standards in the domain of factory, they typically decide or define how things should be built, basically. In the domain of API, it's not very different. So standards in our domain, they basically define how APIs are being designed, how are APIs being governed, how are SDKs being developed by engineering teams, how clients, how servers are being developed. They also define how you are doing testing, how APIs are being mocked so that they can be tested before even going to production. Last but not least, how APIs are being published. So in our domain, in BWFS, we have a portal, a standard central marketplace where we are publishing our APIs. The next ingredient into the definition of standards is how to make attractive and usable the documentation. And once you have all these factors, all these ingredients here in place, you really need to take a look at what you need, how you need to evaluate your API in production. That means how to run analytics in the API, how to publish the API, how to enforce security at the different steps of the API lifecycle, how to run this API at scale. In summary, you really need to take into consideration that you need to have a platform in place. And the standards that are defined under the hood, they are basically defining how your platform actually should look like.
Yeah, sure. It's obvious, but in fact, it's very important to consider that as a source for our, let's say, all the chain when you produce things. Yes, and okay, this is basically the platform, the organization. But okay, what about the components? You remember, I showed a puzzle and the introduction. It's a puzzle of components. But when you speak about a factory, the factory is basically something in the middle of something. You have the source of information or source of product before, and at the end you have to deliver something. So basically, when you deliver something, you have, for example, a construction plan, and as you explained, you have to follow your own standard, potentially some external standards. So it's very important when you follow your own methodology and processes in the factory. And as a source of, of the construction of your product, you have some components. And basically, in API industry, what do? We convey some data, and potentially the data model exists already in a previous API. And what is important is potentially to reuse components cross APIs. So this is part of the factory where in fact the idea is, okay, we assemble some component to build another product. So if you take the inspiration of REST-JSON API, which is one of the famous design nowadays, you design a resource, and the resource should be potentially composed of other schemas. And typically in our industry, you have some part of the data model library, like a passport definition, an address, a frequent flyer information, basically to be reused in some resources, in an order, for example, or in a profile of a customer. So basically, we have some component like suspension, dashboard that can be reused directly in the resource. But some of them are some puzzle also and could be assembled before to be introduced in the resource to be reorganized and where you can assemble them to produce another intermediate component, and we share some between some other resources. And the ultimate is potentially, of course, you have to customize or to tune some models according to the needs. And for example, you can have different models. They are similar at the beginning, but you have to do some extension or some restriction according to the needs. So this is for us also what we can see as a factory to have the reusability of component cross API. So basically, in order to help us to produce in manner standard manner, but also to help our customer to have more interoperability between APIs. So this is the vision of the concept of component for the factory. But this is not possible without production line, correct?
Absolutely. So a very important aspect is to be able to define how you are producing your APIs, how you are producing all the different components. Of course, you will need to have some central components like the portal, like the gateway, and that's something that we have. I have seen that in both Amadeus and Volkswagen Financial Services, we both share that view. But usually you start with a project, and that project should be defined somehow. So the requirements, they need to be translated into an API contract. So we are using OpenAPI for defining the APIs. We are using Git. That means that the Open API it goes directly into Git. And from having the Open API in place, we are actually generating a skeleton. We are generating a server that can actually run a microservice. That microservice, it can be deployed into a portal directly so that people can mock the API, but the engineers, they can actually go inside and implement the business logic. Once the business logic is implemented, it's containerized, and that means that it's ready to be published. It's ready to be deployed and published into the platform. And these are basically the main steps that we have for being able to put an API into production. However, we are also doing checks that I will go a little bit more into detail afterwards, but we are checking secrets. We are also checking that the Open API document is correct. We are also doing testing because we want to ensure that we have quality in place. So all these different aspects that you see here, that they are kind of working together, like in a production line, one after the other, they are really composing a tool chain that can only be maintained and provided by an API platform. And if an API platform is provided as a service with central components like portal, gateway, and tools, other teams can actually profit from them without the need of investing time into developing those. So I think that we have another very important topic, Patrick, which comes directly to after the product line.
Yes, sure. The automation is super important because, of course, when you look about taking inspiration in manufactured industry, the robots are here to help human. And why we have robots is basically to simplify the activity, to reduce boring activities, but also to prevent some mistakes. And the automation could be also added in the tool chain related to the fact to produce some APIs. And for sure, the source is the document that we deliver to our customer, and it's just what we have to deliver. And this can evolve during the time because an API is not static. We have a new project, new features to add regularly, and for that to use We are using also Git as basically a cornerstone to manipulate our Open API specification, but also some other documents. And the pull request related to Git is very important, not only to store the versions, to keep the trace of the change of the versions, but it's also here to help, for sure, to centralize, but potentially to adapt and to verify some standards. You explain us, yes, in the car industry, there is some very important security standards, but also it's something that we can see more and more around APIs with OW SAP, some Open API standard, but we have also some standard inside our company. So in fact, what is important is how to automate the fact that those standards are very well understood. And if you have in front of the chain a quality assurance making the check and telling, oh no, this is not good, you have to redo things, it's not very efficient. What is important is to give visibility to the consumer, to the designer, what is wrong at the beginning. And if it can be automatically verified by some toolings like Spectral or Jenkins, which is basically a way to do the automation during the design and the delivery process. So the sooner is the better to detect potential issues and to adapt our design according to that. So basically, of course, it's important to have human in the loop, but we need also to have some robot to help us. So this is a way for us to, let's say, automate the process. So you see, here I'm starting to speak about quality, but I'm certain that Volkswagen and German people are very well organized. Perhaps best, as our colleagues from Germany in Erding and Munich, they enforce the quality. So what about you, Santiago?
Yeah, you are very, very, very right, Patrick. So quality for us is a must, basically because we are a financial institution and we must ensure compliance guidelines. So in a nutshell, we have quality gates all over the place. From starting with the user story definition, the requirements definition, we have a review process that ensures that the API contract that is coming from the solution design has a level of quality. Now, again, the source code is basically the single source of truth. And that's where we have different type of documentation. For example, we have technical documentation, which have change log, we have the risk log service documentation. So this type of documentation will ensure that the API has a level of quality and is understandable, basically. Now, when it comes to the generation of code, our quality gateway is that we have a tool that is actually generating the code. So we have full control on how that code is generated. When the business logic is being implemented, there is always a 4 eyes principle in place. That means that in each and every pull request, we have team members that are reviewing what's coming into the API. And that's done basically in self-service approach by the engineering teams that are developing those APIs. Now, that would be kind of the baseline for having a minimum set of quality. But since we come from the financial services domain, we need to even go further. That means when it goes to testing, we are enforcing that we have unit tests, that we have API tests, that we have performance tests. We enforce that there is a 70% of coverage for unit tests. We enforce that there is a happy and unhappy path for API tests. And we enforce that the APIs they have a minimum level of performance. And last but not least, security. We are also performing quality checks in the CI/CD process in different aspects. For example, we are checking that there are no hard-coded secrets. And if there are hard-coded secrets, then we are stopping the deployment. We are actually doing penetration tests. So we are using YPT, and that's also something that Patrick mentioned before from OWASP. That's a very, very good standard, and there are tools around it. And last but not least, we are ensuring that any kind of application logs that are being generated by the API, they are obfuscated. That means that they do not contain any kind of PII data. Good, so I think that we have taken you through a lot of content today. Let's take a look at the takeaways. Our main message today is that we just wanted to get together and we wanted to show you how two companies are developing APIs. And we wanted to find a lot of similarities with factories, basically. Because at the end of the day, what both Patrick and myself are looking into, we are looking into how we can scale the number of APIs in the company so that we can support as many business cases as possible. One very key learning that we both agree is that if you want to scale in a factory, you really want to invest from day one you really need to invest from day one into automation. So automation is a key aspect in a factory to be able to scale and be successful.
Yeah, automation and basically also the standardization and component, and basically to improve the reusability and not to speed up the delivery, and but also to bring some coherence between your own product.
Absolutely. And by having reusability, automation, it's also very important to ensure quality. And in order to ensure quality, you need to make it transparent. And in order to make it transparent, it's very easy to visualize, to make it visual to the different teammates, to the different engineers that are working on APIs, how good their APIs are.
Yeah, and at the end also, if you think about a factory, it's very important to have some processes that are very well structured and visible from the designer, for basically the people working, and they have to be interactive and potentially to adapt the process according to the need, because we are in more modern factory where we need to adapt. So basically, as a conclusion, if you want to rechange the title, it could be interesting to say what is very important for our API factory is the governance as code, saying that to give visibility to any developer or designer who want to, a producer of API to have a kind of autonomy from the beginning. So I would like to thank you, and perhaps if we have time, Santiago, perhaps we can share them little bonus at the end. So first of all, we are happy you can connect to us, and let's see. You can visit us, you can connect to us, and we'll be happy to meet you in another. So let's share a little bonus.